I met Reed in the fall of sophomore year, when the university campus was blanketed in red maple leaves, and the wind carried the damp scent of old books, cheap coffee, and promises that everyone believed they could keep. Our school was in the northeast of the U.S., where autumn is always overly romanticized, but it's also there that the most beautiful things often begin with something very trivial. Reed sat in the back row in contemporary American literature class, his feet propped casually on the chair rail, his gray hoodie pulled tight around his neck, his dark brown hair messy just enough to look effortless. I noticed him not because of his appearance, though later I would learn to see every little detail, but because of the way he listened. Reed didn't take many notes. He just watched, and when the professor mentioned a painful passage, his eyes darkened as if someone had touched a private memory. I am Nolan. I often said I came to college to become a different version of myself. Freer, more open, less afraid. But the truth is, I carried a lot of invisible barriers with me. I had loved once, or at least thought I had, and been hurt deeply enough to promise myself. Next time, if I get close to anyone, it would only be physical. No emotions. No expectations. No heartbreak. Reed was the one who broke that promise. But on the first day, I had no idea. We first talked after class, in the long hallway leading to the library. Reed asked me a simple question about the reading, then smiled when I answered at length more than necessary. His smile wasn't wide, just a slight quirk, as if he knew more than he let on. Do you think that passage is about loss? Reed asked. I think it's about avoiding it, I replied. Everyone has loss. The issue is what people do afterward. Reed looked at me longer than usual. Sounds like personal experience. I laughed, a bit awkwardly. Maybe. We started sitting next to each other in class, then studying together, then grabbing late-night eats at the diner near the dorms, where the neon lights always flickered and the servers called students honey regardless of gender. Reed talked about his family in Oregon, his quiet father and his mother who always tried to keep everything intact. I shared less. I was good at listening, and I used that as a way to avoid opening up. One night, after studying in my room, the small room in the men's dorm, walls covered in old movie posters, Reed didn't leave right away. He sat on the edge of my bed, shoulders touching, close enough for me to notice the soap scent on his skin. No one spoke for a few minutes. The silence wasn't heavy, but it was taut, like a string pulled too tight. What are we doing? Reed asked softly, not looking at me. I knew what he was asking, and I knew how I was going to answer, because I'd prepared for this moment long before meeting Reed. Just physical, I said. No strings. No emotions. Reed turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. You sure? I nodded. I believed I was sure. I believed I was strong enough to keep the distance between skin and heart. I believed that what happened next, the first kiss, slow and hesitant, then deeper, more real, was just biology, a desire to touch someone in this vast world. We set clear rules. No sleepovers. No holding hands in public. No prying too much. No talking about the future. Reed agreed, though sometimes I saw him looking at me as if trying to read invisible writing on my skin. In the weeks that followed, we kept meeting between classes after midnight, in the gaps we both pretended were temporary. I started getting used to hearing Reed laugh right in my ear, to the way he rested his forehead on my shoulder when tired, to the strange sense of safety every time the door closed behind us. And that's when I realized something terrifying. I no longer remembered the boundary between promise and desire, but I still told myself it was just physical. We had promised that. I started noticing the changes in the smallest things I had never paid attention to before. Reed remembered I drank black coffee, no sugar. Reed knew I hated alarm clocks and always knocked on my door instead of texting. Reed asked how my midterm went, even though it was a class he wasn't taking. Those questions weren't in our rules, but they weren't clear enough for me to call them concern. I pretended not to notice. We still kept the promise, at least on the surface. No one slept over. When dawn approached, Reed always got up, slipped on his shoes, pulled up his hoodie, and turned back to look at me with hesitant eyes. I would joke to chase away the moment, as if laughing loud enough would prevent emotions from taking root. "See you in class tomorrow," I'd say. "Yeah," Reed replied, and the door closed behind him. But in the days after, in class, I started seeing Reed differently. He no longer sat far away. His knee brushed mine lightly under the desk. When the professor asked a question, Reed looked at me before raising his hand, as if making sure I was there. Those small touches confused me in a way I didn't want to admit. One evening at the end of October, the school held an outdoor movie screening. The whole campus was filled with laughter, the smell of popcorn, and couples wrapped in blankets sitting close. I planned not to go. Places like that always made me feel like I was on the outside of a world I didn't dare enter. But Reed texted, "I have 2 tickets. If you're free." I went. I told myself it was just watching a movie with a friend. Nothing more. We sat next to each other on the cold grass, between 2 noisy groups of students. Reed handed me a cup of hot chocolate, his hand brushing mine for a split second. I pulled away, more reflex than intent. Reed said nothing, just looked at the screen, but I felt the silence stretch between us. "Are we okay?" Reed asked very quietly. Took me a few seconds to answer. "Yeah." "Why do you ask?" Reed shrugged. "Just feels like you're pulling away." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say he was imagining things. But the truth was, I was trying to keep distance because every time Reed was close, I forgot why I built the wall in the first place. After the movie, we didn't go back to my room like usual. Reed said he was tired. I nodded, trying to act casual. But something sank heavy inside me. Hard to name. In the following days, Reed initiated texts less. He still replied, still met me, but a new gap appeared, one I once thought I wanted, but now felt cold. I started wondering if I was losing something I had never allowed myself to have. Then came Halloween night. The dorm was packed. Music echoed through the halls. I didn't like noisy parties, but Reed invited me to go with his group of friends. I drank more than usual. So did Reed. At one point, in the chaotic crowd of costumes, he grabbed my wrist to not get lost. The hold lasted longer than necessary. We escaped to the emergency stairwell, where it was quieter and darker. Reed leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. "Do you remember?" Reed said. "We said we wouldn't let things go too far." I nodded. "I remember. But now," Reed continued, his voice slightly trembling, "I'm not sure I can anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked at Reed, his eyes hid nothing anymore. Everything I tried to avoid was clear in that gaze. "I don't want to hurt you," I said, and for the first time, I realized I meant it. Reed smiled sadly. "I think we've crossed that line already." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say when the initial promise, just physical, was crumbling before my eyes. I only knew that, in that moment, touching Reed was no longer simple desire. It was a longing to stay, to understand, to be chosen. And that scared me more than anything. After Halloween night, things didn't shatter like I had feared. They just shifted. Like a picture hung slightly crooked, noticeable to anyone paying attention, but no one rushed to fix it. Reed didn't bring up the stairwell conversation. Neither did I. We returned to our old rhythm. Studying together, eating lunch, occasionally being together in my cramped dorm room. But something had changed. Reed touched me less. When he smiled, it was still familiar, but his eyes weren't fully relaxed. And me, I started feeling empty every time he left, as if the room lost some of its air. I hated that feeling. I hated needing someone that much. The week before Thanksgiving break, the school became unusually quiet. Many students went home early. The dorms were sparse. Reed said he'd stay. His family didn't make a big deal of holidays. Me too. So we stayed together in a nearly empty campus. That evening, we cooked in the communal kitchen. Simple food, pasta and canned sauce, but Reed acted very seriously, like it was a ritual. He played old music, an indie song I'd heard but couldn't name. We stood side by side, shoulders touching, not saying much. "Have you ever thought," Reed spoke up, "that some promises are made just to be broken?" I froze, wooden spoon midair. "What are you talking about?" Reed didn't look at me. "I don't know. Just a thought." I wanted to lie. to say everything was fine, that we were doing exactly as agreed. But instead I said, "I'm scared." Reed turned. "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I let myself want more," I said slowly, testing each word, "I'll lose control." Reed was silent for a long time. Then he placed his hand on the counter, near mine, but not touching. "I don't need you to promise anything more," Reed said. "I just need to know I'm not alone in this." Those words caught in my throat. I realized I'd gotten so used to keeping everything under control that I forgot love, or anything close to it, was always a form of risk. That night, Reed didn't leave. We didn't talk about sleeping over. It just happened. When the clock passed midnight, he lay down next to me, keeping a small distance between our bodies. I lay still, listening to his breathing, feeling the warm presence beside me. Nothing crossed boundaries, but that restraint made everything more intimate than ever. The next morning, I woke up first. The gray winter light flooded through the window. Reed was still asleep, his face relaxed, unguarded. I watched him longer than necessary, and in that moment, I understood a simple truth. I had crossed the line long ago, not through actions, but by letting someone into my deepest corners. When Reed woke, he didn't ask anything. We made coffee, sat side by side on the bed, legs tangled in blankets. No one mentioned the original promise, but it hung there between us, like an unanswered question. In the days after, I started changing, not suddenly but bit by bit. I held Reed's hand when no one was around. I let myself lean on his shoulder in the library. I told him about the old relationship that made me afraid of attachment. Reed listened, without interrupting, without trying to fix me. "You're not broken," Reed said once when I finished the story. "You're just learning to trust again." Those words stayed with me for a long time. But change never happens in a vacuum. Rumors started spreading, curious glances, half-joking questions. Reed seemed more unfazed than I was. I started feeling the old fear again. Fear of being seen, of being labeled, of what to do if things became too real and then fell apart. And that fear led me to my biggest mistake. One afternoon, when Reed suggested we clarify what we are, I pulled back. I said I wasn't ready. I said we had promised just physical. Those words, when spoken, sounded hollow and crueler than I imagined. Reed's eyes darkened. Not anger, but hurt. "I think," Reed said slowly, "I misunderstood that promise. And for the first time, I saw I was about to lose him. Not because I loved too much, but because I hadn't dared to love enough." After that conversation, Reed disappeared from my world in the cruelest way. He was still there, but no longer with me. We still saw each other in class. Reed still nodded hello, still polite, still normal to the point of heartbreak. But he no longer sat next to me, no longer waited for me outside the lecture hall, no longer texted at midnight to ask if I was okay. That withdrawal wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, just a growing void, as if someone quietly took away a part of my life without warning. I thought I'd feel relieved, that finally, I'd kept the original promise, just physical, no strings. But what I felt was a strange hunger, not a craving for touch, but for understanding. For someone to look at me the way Reed had, as if I wasn't hiding anything. I tried dating someone else, a guy from economics class who laughed a lot, charming talker. We went for beers at the bar near school. He placed his hand on my thigh under the table very naturally. I felt nothing, not discomfort, but not alive either. In my head, there was only one stupid thought. Reed would never place his hand like that. Reed always waited for me to lean toward him first. I went back to my room early, lied about being tired. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, realizing I couldn't replace one person with another body. I tried, and I'd failed. The last week before winter finals, Reed sent me an email. Not a text. Email. As if he needed distance even in communication. "I'll be moving to the North Housing next semester. Just wanted you to know." I read that email 3 times. North Housing was nearly 20 minutes walk from the current dorm. Not far enough to never meet again, but enough to eliminate chance encounters. Reed was withdrawing completely. and I was the one who pushed him to that decision. I found him that evening in the library, where we used to sit together for hours in silence. Reed was packing up his books when he saw me. He paused, letting out a short breath, as if he'd anticipated this meeting. "I'm not here to argue," I said quickly. "I just want to say you're not ready," Reed finished, his voice calm to the point of scary. "I know." "No," I shook my head. "I'm here to say I was wrong." Reed looked at me, for the first time in weeks, his eyes not avoiding, but not opening either. "You weren't wrong," Reed said. "You just chose safety." "I chose fear," I replied. "And I'm tired of it." We stood there for a long time, the sound of flipping pages, footsteps echoing in the vast space. I told Reed things I'd never dared say, that I feared needing someone more than they needed me, that my old relationship taught me to withdraw before being left, that the promise of just physical wasn't a rule, but armor. Reed didn't interrupt. When I finished, he only asked one question. "So what now?" I took a deep breath. "Now I want to choose you. Not because I'm sure everything will be okay, but because I don't want to lose you just to protect my fear." Reed looked down, smiling faintly, a tired smile. "I wish you'd said that sooner." "I know," I said, "but if it's still in time." "I don't know," Reed cut in. "I need time. I put my heart out there, Nolan. I can't keep picking it up and being asked to put it away." Those words hurt more than any rejection. But I understood. For the first time, I truly understood. The following weeks were a lesson in patience. I didn't push. I didn't beg. I was just there when Reed needed a study partner, when he needed silence, when he needed space. I learned to love without controlling the outcome. The day Reed moved, I helped him carry boxes to the new North housing. The room was smaller, window overlooking the parking lot. Not romantic. But when he turned to me, amid the unopened cardboard boxes, Reed's eyes softened. "You're still here," Reed said. "I'll keep being here," I replied. "If you let me." Reed didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, hugged me. A slow, firm hug, no longer hesitant. Not a promise, but a different beginning. And for the first time, I didn't try to label it. I just allowed myself to stay. Winter truly arrived after Reed moved to the North housing. Snow covered the campus, turning every familiar path into white, silent outlines. The university felt like a different place. Slower, more enclosed, as if we were all holding our breath temporarily. Reed and I didn't go back to how we were. No half-hidden nights, no vague agreements. We met less, but each meeting was clearer, more purposeful. Reed still kept distance, but no longer built walls. He let me in step by step, cautious but real. We started with the simplest things. Eating lunch together in the cafeteria, sitting across instead of side by side. Walking around the frozen lake, hands in coat pockets, talking about exams, summer plans, ordinary things I once thought unimportant. But that ordinariness made me feel secure. One evening, as we sat in Reed's room, yellow lights, window fogged with condensation, he asked me, "If we hadn't promised just physical back then, do you think things would be different?" I thought for a long time. "Maybe not," I said. "The problem wasn't the promise. It was me using it to hide." Reed nodded. "Me too. I thought if we called it physical, I wouldn't get hurt." We looked at each other. No blam. Just belated understanding. The first time we kissed again, really kissed, was on a snowy afternoon. No rules. No testing boundaries. Reed placed his hand on my cheek, touching lightly, as if asking permission. I nodded. That kiss didn't overwhelm me like before. Settled me, like coming home after a long trip. We didn't rush to label it. No one said, "What are we?" for a long time. But Reed slept over. I held his hand around others. I introduced him to friends, no explanations, no apologies. Those things, for me, were once unimaginable. One night, near the end of the semester, I woke up and saw Reed watching me. His eyes were strangely peaceful. "Do you regret it?" Reed asked. "Regret what?" "Breaking the original promise." I smiled, reaching out to touch his hand. "I think," I said, That promise served its purpose. It taught me I can't live just on defense.
Reed leaned closer, forehead touching mine.
I like this version of you. Me too, I replied, and this time I wasn't afraid to say it. When spring came, the campus shedding its last snow, trees budding, I realized something. Love isn't the explosive drama like in movies. It's staying after the hurts, choosing honesty even when fear is still there. We once promised just physical, but in the end, what bound us wasn't flesh, but both of us daring to remove our armor, bit by bit, in front of each other. And this time I didn't run away anymore.